Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 5. Grumbling to himself as he was once again pounding down the pavement, Ichigo winced as Tatsuki swatted him on his arm. Glaring at her, he could see a smirk on her face. "So what happened to you yesterday that's left you so sensitive?" she asked curiously, watching him slow down and come to a stop outside a small park. "Just some idiots, both on the way home and waiting inside to ambush me," he lied, stretching his arms above his head to loosen the kinks in it. "You know, the usual deal. TCH, you're going soft if they can leave you stiff," she teased him, slugging him again and watching him deftly catch her wrist. "Still hard enough to put up a fight though, Tatsuki," he chuckled, flicking her on her nose and dashing away as she fumed at him. As they continued to run, he had kept his senses extended to search for any hint of Rukia, but was disappointed to find not a trace of her left. Brushing his hurt aside, he left Tatsuki at her place and ran back to his own home. A few hours later, Ichigo was listening to his science teacher drone on again about intermolecular forces, when he felt Kyoka run a finger down the back of his neck, sending a shiver of pleasure through his being. "Stop it," he yelled at her, hearing her chuckle and walk to sit on his desk, obscuring his book with her form. "Relax, Ichigo," she said with a yawn, stretching her arms above her head. "I just wanted to help you relax a bit, since being so stiff all the time would lead to early wrinkles and such. Thanks for the beauty tip. Now could you get off my book please?" he mumbled, trying not to stare at her, as her robe slid up her thigh when she leaned back across the desk even more fully. "But I'm tired," she moaned, tracing circles idly in the air with her finger. "Then go back to sleep," he said in frustration as he turned his attention back to his teacher. "Hang on, it's almost noon, how can you still be tired?" "Simple silly, I didn't go to sleep when you did," she answered him, sitting up and moving to take a seat on his neighbor's desk. "And you didn't because?" he asked, playing along with her for now. "Because I needed to work on restoring your reserves," she replied, giving him a bored look. "It's not a simple matter of, oh hey let me restore your reserves. I need to help your soul refine your power to better match my own." "Why, I thought that with our acceptance of one another, it would adjust to suit us," he asked, taking note of the homework that the teacher assigned them for next week, before starting to pack away his things for lunch. "Yes, our bond helps, but your reiatsu used to be raw and heavy," she said idly, walking next to him as he headed towards the roof with the others. "My own reiatsu though is like my silk robe, smooth and gentle. As such I need to re-educate your soul on how to replenish your reserves. Soon I won't have to and it will restore itself much faster." "Sorry that I can't do anything to help," he said gently, looking at her out of the corner of his eye. It's not your fault," she said with a shrug of her shoulders. "Anyway, do you have anything to do today?" "Nothing planned really. I have practice tomorrow and Thursday, but other than that, today and Friday are my free days." "Excellent," she crowed happily, startling him when she leapt into the air without any regard for her clothing. "That means we can start your Kido training when we get home." Noticing him pale at the mention of Kido, she gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Trust me, it won't be as bad as you think. You just need to listen and relax. Oh heads up, your friends seem to be calling you." "What?" Looking around him, he could see Keigo waving his hand frantically in front of his face. "What?" he asked out loud this time. "Have you been ignoring me this whole time?" Keigo whined pathetically. "I thought we were best friends, Ichigo." "Who'd want to be best friends with you anyway?" Ichigo grumbled at him. "Now what did you want?" "I was asking if you wanted to swing by the arcade after school. Apparently they just got a few new games delivered to them." "Can't, I've already got other plans," he replied, turning back to his bento and watching as Keigo comically fell to the floor after being shot down. Later that day as Ichigo left the school grounds, Kyoka was surprised when he headed in opposite direction to the normal route he used to get home or to the dojo. "Where are we going, Ichigo?" she asked from within his inner world, watching the world pass by through his eyes. "We're going to solve the problem of being unable to use my badge, Kyoka," he answered with a grin as he neared the Urahara shop. "Hat and Clogs owes me for all the times I've helped him out before." Feeling her understanding, he continued the rest of the way in silence, smirking when the shop came into view. Walking up to the front entrance, he could see Jinta bickering with Ururu about something. Feeling slightly sorry for the little girl, who had grown quite a bit since he last saw her, he lifted the red-haired boy up by the back of his shirt. "You know you're being an awful bully right now," Ichigo chided him, while said boy struggled in his grip. "Let me go, freaking Carrot Top," Jinta yelled, trying to lash out at Ichigo unsuccessfully. "If you say so," Ichigo smirked in reply, dropping the boy on his ass. "Is Urahara in?" he asked, turning to the door when he saw it slide open. To his utter amazement, he saw Karen walking out of the store, a bag of goods in her hand. "Karen," he asked, startling her as she looked up at him. "Ichi-ni, what are you doing here?" Karen asked, hiding the bag behind her and making Ichigo raise his eyebrow at her. "I could be asking you the same question," he said, gesturing to the bag behind her, "since I don't remember you being big on candy anyway." Seeing her shift uncomfortably, he shrugged and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, just be careful, okay? I don't know what you've gotten into, but I want you to promise me that you'll stay safe, okay?" "Hey, you're one to talk," she muttered under her breath, but nodded her head at him. "Later, Ichi-ni," she yelled, rushing off back home. Watching her disappear around the corner, Ichigo turned his attention back to the store and entered it. Seeing the shopkeeper seated on a cushion at the front of the shop, he had to guess that he heard everything and was just waiting for Ichigo to ask him about it. "I don't want to hear about her fighting off hollows anytime soon, Urahara-san," he said, walking inside, stopping in front of the shopkeeper. "I don't think I'd be able to forgive you for getting her involved in this. You wound me, Kurosaki-san, if you think that I would draw a young girl into such a world," Kazuki said in mock hurt, while his fan was clutched in his hand. "I'm just a humble shopkeeper providing her with goods that will help keep her life, spirit free." "Whatever, Urahara. Just don't cross that line," Ichigo scoffed, fixing the former captain with a glare. "I was wondering if you had some supplies on hand I could use." "Oh, and what exactly are you looking for, Kurosaki-san?" Kazuki asked, turning serious. "Nothing that you need to worry about, Urahara-san," Ichigo replied, trying to reassure him. "I'm looking for a soul removal glove and I was wondering if Khan was still around." "Oh, is that all?" the shopkeeper asked, hiding behind his fan, while his mind raced through possible explanations for why Ichigo wasn't using his badge. The most likely being that he knew of its purpose and was unwilling to reveal himself just yet. "Well, I think I have a glove in stock, but I'm afraid that I don't know where Khan is," Kazuki said as he got up from his seat and began to rummage around in the cupboard under the counter. "Are any of the mod souls here then?" Ichigo asked again, noticing Nova's green doll form peek its head from around the corner. "Hey there, Nova," he called out, waving at the doll. "Kurosaki-san," Nova replied, walking over to greet him, while Kazuki finally returned with the glove. "Am I to assume that you would like to ask for Nova's help then?" Kazuki asked as he handed the glove over to Ichigo. "If you're willing, Nova," Ichigo said, keeping his gaze fixed on the mod soul. "I thought you lost your powers though," the mod soul asked, peering up at Ichigo curiously. "I did, but I've managed to gain them back," Ichigo replied, exchanging a look with Kazuki. "I know this is sudden, but I could really use your help in particular. The idea of Khan, Liran or Cloud walking around in my body unsettles me." Turning to look at his creator, he saw Kazuki give him the slightest nod. "I'm willing to help in any way I can, Kurosaki-san," Nova said, bowing to him. "I'll consider them on loan to you for the moment, Kurosaki-san," Kazuki spoke, drawing Ichigo's attention back to him. "Please take good care of them." "Of course, Urahara-san," Ichigo answered, stowing Nova away in his bag. "I'll see you guys some other time then," he called out with a wave of his hand, exiting the store. Once the teen had turned down the corner, Yoruichi slinked over to Kazuki in her feline form. "Was that really a wise move, Kazuki?" she asked, settling herself in his lap. "I don't want him in trouble with Soul Society, but they will think of this as being really suspicious if they find out. Better we aid him in any way we can, Yoruichi-san, than risk alienating him any further," Kazuki replied, idly running his fingers along her back. "I'm hoping that if it comes to it, he will at least listen to reason when we speak to him." Finally arriving home, Ichigo dodged his father's attack and walked upstairs to his room, intent on finishing his homework before dinner so that his evening would be free to spend practicing Kido. Entering his room, he saw that his substitute badge was still in the same place on the floor. "Hey Nova, could you do me a quick favor?" he asked, helping the mod soul out of his bag. "What is it, Kurosaki-san?" Nova asked as he peered up at him. "For starters, please try and call me Ichigo. You're going to be in my body sometimes, so we could at least be on a first-name basis with one another." Seeing the mod soul nod his head in agreement, he then turned and pointed to his badge on the floor. "And lastly, can you move that away to say, the top of my cupboard?" he asked, gesturing to the open space above the area Rukia used to sleep in. "Of course, but why not just pick it up yourself?" Nova asked, opening a wormhole and depositing the badge away. "Long story, I'll explain it later," Ichigo replied, sinking into his desk chair. "I don't know what you normally do to amuse yourself, but feel free to use my laptop if you want. I know you won't do something like search for free porn sites or stuff like that," he finished, watching as Nova's head turned a vibrant red as he hastily shook his head in the negative. A few hours later, Ichigo was done with both his work and dinner and entered his room to hear Nova chuckling to himself. Glancing over the mod soul's shoulder, he had to suppress a chuckle himself as an old cartoon with Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote played out, with Wile E bragging to Bugs about how he was going to catch the elusive rabbit. Leaving before he got too caught up in the pair's antics, he sunk into his familiar meditative pose and slipped into his inner world. Landing with a soft thump in a seat, he blinked and looked around to find himself in a replica of his classroom with him seated in the front row. Hearing the door open, he felt his face rapidly turn crimson, as Kyoko walked in, clad in a tight white button-up shirt with the top two buttons left undone, revealing enough of her cleavage for perverts like Keigo and Kon to be lying on the floor in a bleeding mess had they been there, a green skirt with a matching jacket and black high heels. Stopping in front of the board, she smirked at him and began to scribble across the board. "Welcome to Kido 101, she said with a smile, gesturing to where she had written the course name down. "Now you know the basics of Reiatsu control and how it can be used to augment your physical abilities," she explained, pointing to the familiar outline of a human body with a store of Reiatsu in its center and currents of it flowing to other parts of the body. "We're going to take this a step further now, as each of these conduits can act as a channel for Kido," she continued, pointing to his hands and her sealed form. "The difficulty arises from the fact that you are trying to control your Reiatsu once it is outside of your body, a task that is difficult to all but the greatest of Kido masters. Thankfully you have me," she finished with a smile, placing her hand on her bosom. "Before we begin, I want to show you several illustrations of how your Reiatsu is molded to cast a spell." As her hand reached into her cleavage, Ichigo had to pinch his nose shut, in an attempt to stem the nosebleed he felt coming. Pulling out a remote, she took a seat next to him and activated a projector above them. Appearing on the white screen, he could see Rukia flowing through the motions of the first spell he ever felt, namely Bakudo no 1, Sai. Here we can see that the Reiatsu is being channeled through her fingers, before being focused on the area just outside the appendage, she explained, as she stopped the demonstration and pointed towards Rukia's fingertips. Several other spells manipulate your Reiatsu in a similar fashion. They are Bakudo's 4, 9, 10, 61 and Hado's 1, 4 and 90 to name but a few. As she continued, she pointed out how Hado 31, 32, 33, 63, 73 and Bakudo 63, amongst others required his Reiatsu to be channeled into his palm, while others like Hado 54, required it to be channeled through his Zanpakudo. That piece of information intrigued him, as his style of fighting with Zangetsu allowed him to unleash close-range Getsuga Tensho for devastating effect. "I see that you're already thinking of the possibilities, Ichigo, that's good. Innovation in battle is key to defeating your enemy," she lectured him, bringing up the final slide that showed Bakudo 81. "These spells are incredibly difficult, since it requires the manipulation of Reiatsu in the area in front of you, rather than from your blade or hands. What are we going to start with then?" he asked, his mind acting like a sponge as he tried to absorb all the details before him. "I have a feeling that Bakudo no 61, Raikujokuro will be most appropriate for you," since it has a simple incantation and only needs your Reiatsu to simply flow through your fingertips. Snapping her fingers, the walls of the classroom disappeared, leaving them at the front of a large Kido range, similar in appearance to the ones used by the academy students. Looking out at the end of the range, he could see several wooden dummies arranged as targets. "Listen carefully now, Ichigo," she said as she walked up to him again and dragged him to the middle and manipulated his arms and legs into position. Blushing at the contact, he tried to keep his mind focused while she continued. "The incantation is simple. Carriage of thunder, bridge of a spinning wheel. With light, divide this into 6. Now repeat it, while channeling your Reiatsu into your fingertips and into the space just in front of them." Nodding in understanding, he took a deep breath and visualized the dam in his body, opening the sluice gate to his hands and feeling his Reiatsu flow into his fingertips. Opening his eyes, he began to force his Reiatsu out through his fingertips, his brow furrowing as he tried to control the energy. Carriage of thunder, bridge of a spinning wheel. With light, divide this into 6. Bakudo no. 61. Raikujokuro, he chanted, only to recoil as the energy arced back into him, shocking him and sending him to his knees. Recovering from the backlash, he could see Kyoka looking down at him with a stern expression on her face. "When during my explanation did I tell you to force the Kido to obey you?" she asked, pulling him to his feet and bringing his face down to her level. "When did I tell you to use all your Reiatsu to fuel the spell?" Understanding that he had messed up and forgotten her lesson about rationing his Reiatsu, he hung his head in shame. Feeling her hand cup his cheek, he looked up at her, his eyes widening as they took in his mother's caring smile. "Don't force it and don't overdo it, Ichigo," she said soothingly, placing her hand on his chest. "When you want the power, allow a little bit of it to flow through you and shut it off when you know it's enough. Then when you feel it in your fingertips, let it flow away from you, acting only as a guide for it," she explained, tracing a path from his chest, up through his shoulder and down his arm, until she finally reached his fingertips. "Now try again." Feeling his body relax at her presence, Ichigo took a deep breath and tried her suggestions. Allowing a small stream to flow through the gate, he let it flow through his being, merely guiding it on its way. When he began to struggle to control it, he shut off the flow and concentrated solely on the task of guiding it. Carriage of thunder, bridge of a spinning wheel. With light, divide this into 6. Bakudo no. 61. Raikujokuro, he whispered this time, feeling the Reiatsu flow away from him. Seeing several bolts of light shoot towards the target, he watched as they slammed into its torso, pinning it in place. A minute later though, the Kido dissipated in a flash, leaving him confused as to what happened. Turning back to Kyoka, he could see her back in her true form smiling at him. "Your concentration slipped and the spell came undone," she explained, watching his brow furrow again. "In time you will be able to keep the spell in place without thinking about it, but for now you need to remember that you are still feeding and controlling it. Think of it like an outpost that a country starts. Without proper governance and resources, it will fall into ruin." "That's a strange way of putting it," he said as he clenched and unclenched his hand repeatedly. "Guess all I can do is practice then." Nodding in agreement, Kyoka stood back again and allowed him to practice, interfering only when she wanted him to learn to unconsciously control the Kido. After 2 hours though, Ichigo felt his body drained off energy, and a quick look at his reserves showed that he had drained himself of energy. "You did well today, Ichigo. I look forward to seeing how you progress once we start with more destructive spells," she said, bringing his attention back to her. "I'm almost dreading the consequences already," he said softly, willing himself out of his inner world. Reappearing in the living world, he could see his laptop off and Nova sleeping across it on his desk. Glancing at the watch on his wrist, his eyes widened at seeing it was already 2300. Changing into his sleepwear, he could feel Kyoka's presence working on refining his soul. Sending her his thanks, he slipped into a peaceful sleep, missing the wave of affection she sent back. Wednesday came and went in pretty much the same way for Ichigo, except that it was his first day meeting the guys' karate team. Entering the gymnasium with Tatsuki and Tetsuo, he wasn't surprised that everyone zeroed in on his presence, freezing in their own practice rituals. Ignoring them, he headed off to change into his karate gi. When he finally returned, Stretching his arms and legs to warm up the muscles, it was to see Tetsuo talking to the other members of the team, their faces showing their apprehension. Joining them, he caught the last bit of the conversation where Tetsuo outlined that they were each going to go against him for 5 minutes each before swapping out. TCH, not like they're going to be anywhere near as good as Tatsuki, he thought, watching as Tetsuo led him over to some padded mats with a circle drawn in the middle of it. I suppose this will be more of an endurance exercise than skill training, Kyoka remarked from his mind. Even if I helped them, I doubt you would even flinch now. Keeping his face blank, Ichigo had to admit that she had a point. Other than when she spawned that illusion of Kenpachi and Yamamoto, he had been fairly competent at remaining calm in the face of what she threw at him, a fact reinforced since he had managed to strip away her illusion of Grimmjow doing cartwheels and pirouettes that morning during class with his will, an act that pleased her far more than he could imagine. 2 hours later and he was smirking down at the bruised and battered forms of the other team members. True to his word, he had not held back, although he had only retaliated when they had left him an opening to exploit, while dodging their blows the majority of the time. Off to the side, the coach was looking on in amusement and Ichigo wondered why he hadn't called the practice to a halt earlier to suggest an alternative to them. He guessed that it was simply because the man wanted to see him in action. "Oh Ichigo," Tatsuki called out to him, causing him to look around to find her. Looking off to the side of the stands he could see her waving her hand in the air in an attempt to get his attention. "What Tatsuki?" he shouted back, walking over to her. "You need to stop making it look so easy when you take on those guys. It's hard enough without you destroying what little confidence they have already," she said with a smirk. "Not to mention it served as a major distraction for the girls since they watched your every movement rather than my fists. They must be really desperate if they're looking my way," he chuckled, not missing her raising an eyebrow at him. "I wouldn't be so sure about that Ichigo," she murmured, picking up her bag as he grabbed his own. "You were scary before and that kept them away. Seeing you as a high school athlete though, they're going to flock to you eventually." "Oh really now?" he asked with a hint of amusement. "And what about you Tatsuki, are you going to be one of my admirers?" He teased her, wincing when she slugged him. "Last time I checked, I was the last one to make you cry in a fight. So tell me why I would go after a crybaby like you." She shot back with a grin. "Now that's low Tatsuki," he muttered. "Then again, you were the last one to cry between the two of us," he whispered, making her freeze in her step. Looking back at him now, she remembered the time just after Orihime's kidnapping when she had punched him hard enough to send his head through a window and her breakdown after it. "Yeah well you were a bit of a jerk when that happened," she muttered under her breath, drawing level with him again. "Only because I needed to be," he replied softly. "But that's the past now." As they continued on their way home though, they saw Ryu rushing across the rooftops above them. Ichigo was slightly surprised when the Quincy hadn't looked his way, but took it as a sign that his suppression training was paying off early dividends. Not one to rest on his laurels though, he quickly clamped down on any and all traces of Reiatsu he was leaking. Seeing him looking after the Quincy, Tatsuki nudged him to get him moving again, knowing it wasn't healthy for him to dwell on such things when he was finally getting his life back on track. Looking back at her, Ichigo smirked and continued with her, knowing that he wasn't needed at the moment anyway. Besides he had Kido practice to dread this evening, especially so since Kyoka was starting him on Hado number 33 tonight. As the hollow he had been tracking dissolved into thin air, Ryu dismissed his bow and looked back to the strange Reiatsu he had felt near the school. When he had passed it earlier, it was barely a blip on his radar, making him assume that it was a human with more Reiatsu than normal. Now as he tried to search for it though, it seemed to have vanished, almost as if the owner had noticed him and worked to suppress it even more. Memorizing the strange texture of it, he made his way back home, making a note to watch for it more closely. Chapter 6. Just as she said they would, Ichigo was conscious of the appreciative looks that he was getting from the school's female population. Honestly, it was times like this that he was glad that he had greater restraint than some of his peers, since some of them would take full advantage of this increase in popularity. "So tell me again how this is positive attention," he grumbled inwardly to Kyoka, feeling his Zanpakuto spirit lounging on her bed in his inner world. "Well, if you were the type to date a girl, Then this would be very positive indeed, she quipped back, snuggling back under her covers. Now leave me alone, I'm still sleepy. Feeling her presence withdraw from him, he sighed and went about his day, trying to ignore the stares he got. So, ready to admit I was right? Tatsuki asked him, a grin plastered on her face as they walked past the small audience that they had for practice today, consisting mainly of the younger girls of the school, girls that wouldn't know much of his history. Zip it, Tatsuki, he growled at her, fuming at the idea that he was being ogled and there really wasn't much he could do about it. All through the day he had been subject to stares, and even more surprisingly to him, some of them were from people he had known for most of his high school life, like Orihime or Mahana. Hell, even Ryo was looking at him over the top of her book. As they walked out of the school grounds, a shrill voice rang out through the air. Machiru, wait! They heard Ryo yell, causing them to stop and turn to face her direction. As they looked back, Machiru pushed past them with a haunted expression on her face, shoving the two martial artists out the way. Hey, watch it! Ichigo yelled after her, watching as she disappeared around the corner. Turning back once again, he and Tatsuki headed back to where Ryo stood in her track uniform with her bag in hand. Kneeling down, she picked up Machiru's discarded cell phone and bag. Sorry about that, Mr. Agawa, she spoke into the phone, but Machiru just dropped her stuff and ran off. What? Watching the track star's eyes, they could see them widen in worry before softening. Of course, sir, I understand. Don't worry, I'll make sure she gets home safely. Ending the call, she looked up to see Ichigo and Tatsuki in front of her. So what was that all about, Ryo? Tatsuki asked, watching the girl's shoulders slump. That was Machiru's dad, she answered hesitantly. Her mother was in a car accident and was taken to the hospital in a critical condition. At her words, a worried look crossed Tatsuki's face, while Ichigo frowned. When she heard that, she just dropped everything and ran off. I can get in contact with Mahana and Shizuru. Do you think you can get in contact with Orihime? Ryo asked. We're going to need all the help we can get if we want to find her. Yeah, sure, Tatsuki replied, reaching for her phone. Think you can start looking for her, Ichigo? She asked, turning to face the orange-haired teen. Yeah, of course, he said, turning away from them and running over to the corner he had seen her disappear down. Just need to get far enough away from them so that I can find her ribbon and follow it, he thought as he ran, trying to remember what hers felt like. Finding himself in a secluded spot, he concentrated on materializing the ribbons around him, snatching the one he recognized as Machiru's out of the myriad amount of them. Impressive, Ichigo, Kyoka said from within his inner world. To be able to use such a high-level technique is quite astounding. It's an old technique to me, he replied, rushing down the road after the ribbon. I used it to find a soul trapped in a parakeet once before. As he kept running, he found himself stopping as the trail cut through one of the many parks in Karakura. Looking down, he could see shoe prints roughly the size of Machiru's in the dirt. Following it, he soon found some skid marks down a rocky embankment, as if someone had fallen. Seeing the little droplets of blood, he followed them to find his classmate clutching her knees to her chest tightly, her arms and legs bleeding from her fall. Machiru, he said out loud, not wanting to startle the girl by walking up to her. Looking up at him, the girl sniffled and hastily rubbed her forearm across her face, trying to hide the evidence of her tears. What do you want, Kurosaki? She choked out, still struggling to stop herself from breaking down into sobs. I was just checking to make sure that you're okay. Your father and the others are quite worried about you, he said soothingly, taking a few hesitant steps closer. I was just trying to get to the hospital, she whispered, her hands tightening around her body even tighter. But I slipped and got these scratches, she said, showing him her torn palms and knees, making Ichigo wince at how hard she must have fallen. Come on, let's get you somewhere we can fix you up, he said, placing his hand on her shoulder, only to have her throw it off and back away from him. I can do it myself, she stuttered, tears pouring from her eyes from the pain, as she tried and failed to get up. No, you can't, he chided her. And the others are still quite far away. You need to get somewhere so that we can clean those wounds and stop the bleeding. After all, you're not doing anyone any favors by making them worry about you and your mother. Instead of calming her though, This seemed to make the normally timid girl all the more agitated and wrathful. "What would you know about it?" she shouted back at him, tears flowing freely while her voice broke under the strain. "How could you possibly know what my family's going through right now?" She continued yelling at him, trying in vain to get past him. Making a mad dash past his left, she soon found her wrists caught in his tight grip. "Let me go. You're feeling as if your entire world is falling apart around you," he said, pinning her arms at her side as she continued to struggle against him. "You're looking for any light in the darkness, praying beyond belief that this is all a nightmare that you're going to wake up from soon," he finished, feeling her stop struggling and look up at him again. "I know what you're going through, because I went through something similar. When I was 9, I woke up with my mother's bleeding body on top of me and I shut out the rest of the world until someone knocked some sense into me," he whispered. "You can't run from it though, you just need to let it all out, okay?" Feeling the girl's shoulders shake, he could feel her grip his GI tighter as she let her tears fall again, her cries muffled against his body. "God, I didn't mean against me." He wanted to yell, but instead wrapped his arms around her in a hug, stroking her back as she cried. Slipping his arms underneath her legs, he lifted her up so that her head was resting on his shoulder, while her arms wrapped around his neck, looking like he was carrying a rather large child. "Please let Tatsuki be the only person we run into," he thought, heading back up the hill he had followed her down and emerging back in the park. Knowing his father's clinic was closer and having no idea where she lived to begin with, he started to make his way towards it, struggling to text Tatsuki his destination while supporting Machiru. Halfway there, Tatsuki ran into them, raising an eyebrow at their position. Seeing that Machiru was passed out though, she silently joined him and took his bag from him so that he could focus on carrying her. "And this happened how?" she whispered to him, trying not to wake the girl up. "Long story," he whispered back as Ryo and Mahana rounded the corner. "For now, can we just get her to my dad's before we continue with the interrogation?" Nodding her head in agreement, they continued on the way there, collecting Orihime and Chizuru on the way. "You know that bad boy image you tried to maintain?" Kyoka asked, appearing a few feet in front of him, skipping about. "Yeah, what about it?" he asked while paying little heed to the others as Tatsuki held their questions off. "Well, you can take it, run it through a shredder. Take the scraps and put it in a blender. Take the mulch left over and set it alight and scatter the ashes to the wind, since it is beyond maintaining after everyone hears about this," she teased, watching as a tick mark appeared on his forehead. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he asked. "Yup," she replied with a grin, flashing him a wide smile. "Remind me again how you're one of the most feared Zanpakuto in existence?" he asked sarcastically, seeing her pout. "I don't know, my bubbly personality is just too much for them," she replied with her finger pressed to her lips, making him roll his eyes at her. "Clearly that's all it is," he muttered, seeing the clinic come into sight at long last. Watching as Tatsuki opened the door for him, he stepped into the clinic proper. Looking up from where she sat at the front desk, Yuzu's eyes popped open as her brother carried in a young girl, while Tatsuki, Orihime and some others she didn't recognize trailed after him. "What happened, Oni-chan?" she asked as Ichigo walked past her into one of the examination rooms. "She took a nasty fall down an embankment not far from here," he replied, setting the girl down on the bed and struggling to pry her hands from his GI. Abandoning the idea of keeping it on, he shrugged his arms out of it, exposing his nude torso to the rest of the girls in the room, who, with the exception of Yuzu and Chizuru, felt their faces rapidly heat up. "Can you ask Dad to come in and see her?" he asked, seeing his sister nod and disappear. Seeing the blushing faces before him though, he suppressed his own blush and hastily left the room, intent on getting a shirt from his room. When he finally returned a few minutes later, he could see his father already cleaning the wounds, a look of intense concentration on his face. "How bad is it?" he asked, watching as his father reached for some needle and thread. "She'll need stitches and bandages over some of these cuts, but she should be able to go home tonight," Ishin replied calmly, working with precision as he started stitching the wounds shut. "Take your friends out please, it's getting a bit crowded in here." Nodding his head at the man, he began to usher the others out. "So how did you get her to trust you like that, Ichigo?" Mahana asked once they were all in the waiting room again. She was always awfully timid around you from what I remember. I just knew what she was going through, he said with a shrug, turning away from them. What did he mean by that? Mahana asked once he was gone, causing everyone to turn and face Tatsuki for an answer. Feeling Machiru's phone ring again, Ryo stepped outside to answer it. If you want an answer, you're going to have to ask him, Tatsuki replied, looking at the hallway he had disappeared down. But that is the one part of him that he rarely ever shares with anyone else. Entering the exam room again, Ichigo waited as his father finished stitching up her cuts, before tucking her under a blanket. While he cleaned up the supplies he used, Ichigo watched as the girl's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Seeing his bloody GI in a corner, he dropped it in the bag to have it washed separately. I'm guessing that Ryo's already told her dad where she is, so I suspect that he might show up here sooner or later, he said as his father approached him. That's good. Physically, she won't even have to worry about scars along her arms and legs, so that's one good thing, Isshin replied, ushering his son out of the room again. As for her mental state, I think you've helped that quite a bit too. So what is she, your girlfriend or something? He joked, only to let out a pained yell as Ichigo sent him flying with a punch. Can't you be serious for 2 freaking minutes, old man? He hissed in anger, watching as the waiting girls looked at him curiously. She'll be fine. Did her dad say anything about when he'd be here? He was leaving the hospital to head here when I last spoke to him, so he should be here soon, Ryo replied. All right, do any of you want something to eat or drink? He offered. I'd be a poor host if I didn't at least offer you something. Oh Ichigo, you're finally showing interest in the opposite sex. Isshin hollered at the top of his lungs, earning looks of disgust from Ichigo, Tatsuki and Chizuru, while Orihime, Mahana and Ryo looked uncomfortable. Just shut up already, she's still trying to rest after all. Ichigo snapped, knocking him out again. As the rest of them accepted his offer, he led them to the kitchen in the attached house and poured them some coke, while Yuzu worked on creating a quick platter of sandwiches. 20 minutes later and they were back in the clinic with a frantic Mr. Agawa, his face deathly pale after the day he was having. Ichigo almost wanted to glare at Ryo, since after hearing that he was the one to find her and bring her back for treatment, the man had damn near taken his arm off as he shook it in thanks. Hearing the commotion, Machiru had woken up and was now subject to a tight hug, both she and her father bawling their eyes out. Soon afterwards though, the pair of them left the exam room with Machiru being supported by her father and left with their thanks once again. The rest of the girls left soon afterwards much to Isshin's dismay, citing the need to get home before it got too dark. Before the man could offer to let them stay the night, Ichigo had once again knocked him out and dragged him back into the house. Thank God that's over, Ichigo sighed as he walked into his room and collapsed onto his bed later that evening. Taking note of his exhaustion, Nova reduced the volume on his movie, trying to give the teen some quiet. It was not to last however, as he soon felt himself dragged into his inner world. Looking up, he could see Kyoka staring down at him with a blank look on her face, practice sword held ready. Do we have to? He groaned, yelping as she brought her blade down where his head used to be. Yes, because you're more likely to remember it if you actually feel it happened to you, she smirked, lashing out again. You're a real slave driver, you know that. He growled at her, grabbing the spare blade and clashing with her again. Mercifully the session was kept short, with her spending just as much time taking him through the forms with slow, rigorous instruction as well as fast-paced, learn-as-you-go experience. When he returned to his body, he grimaced and turned his attention to his school work, thankful that it was relatively light load. Before he could begin though, his phone rang, showing an unknown number. Hello, he answered suppressing a yawn. Ichigo-san, it's Machiru, he heard her say, her voice stronger than when he last spoke to her. Oh, nice to hear from you again, he answered, surprised that the timid girl had called him, especially since he hadn't given her his number before. Must have gotten it from Tatsuki or Orihime, he thought. So how's your mother doing? She's going to be fine. They say she'll make a full recovery, but the coming weeks will be hard on her, she answered, her tone showing that while saddened, the news had given her the reassurance she desperately needed. That's good to hear, he said, rubbing the back of his neck to relieve it of some of the strain. "Thank you, but that's not why I called," she replied, her tone becoming hesitant. I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you did for me today. And I'm sorry for shouting at you like I did, it was rude and hurtful on my part. Don't worry about it, you were going through a rough time and needed someone to be there to vent at. Just remember not to bottle it up, okay? He asked, waiting as he heard her sniffle on the other side of the line. I will, thank you again Ichigo. I'll see you at school tomorrow, she replied, her voice gaining some strength again. Yeah, see ya, he said, ending the call. Someone's getting lucky soon, Kyoka teased him again, conjuring several illusions of his female classmates all blushing and looking at him with doe-like eyes. Enough, he growled back, shattering the illusion, much to his surprise. A sharp and determined mind Ichigo, that's one half of what you need to truly master my powers, she said with a smile as she appeared in front of him. And the other half? He asked curiously, watching as she smirked and walked up to him, bending over to reveal even more of her cleavage to him. That, you need to find out on your own, she laughed, flicking him on his nose and disappearing once again. The following morning after his jog, Ichigo found himself faced with a smirking Karen and blushing Yuzu. Okay, what exactly is on your minds that you're fidgeting so much around me? He asked, settling into his chair while Yuzu set a plate of food in front of him. Oh nothing at all Ichi-ni, Karen said with a grin. Yuzu and Dad were simply telling me how you heroically rescued the damsel in distress, moving her so much that she absolutely refused to let go of you. Not to mention the other girls that couldn't help but drool as you stripped in front of them. Suppressing the urge to rant and rave about doing no such thing, he took a deep breath to calm himself down, before smirking back at Karen. Yes, she refused to let go of me, but of course I couldn't blame her for that. And can you blame the others for wanting more of this? He quipped, gesturing to his torso and watching as Karen blanched at him, while Yuzu squeaked and rushed back into the kitchen. You need to move out of here soon, Karen mumbled at him. Dad's beginning to rub off on you. If only it was Dad that was the cause of this, he said inwardly, noticing that Kyoka was still asleep. Walking onto the school grounds half an hour later, he could already hear the low buzz of conversation that followed him. Not surprised that most of them had heard of what he did, he sent several heated glares at the guys as they sniggered at him and tried his best to ignore the looks of adoration he was receiving from the girls. Thankfully none of them had the courage to talk to him still, so he managed to get to class without too much hassle. Entering it though, he almost wished that he was still outside it. Ichigo, Keigo yelled at him, rushing headfirst into his arm and collapsing to the ground in a weeping heap. Do you have any idea what you've done? All around the school girls are talking about asking you out and not anyone else. There's even some seniors interested in you. Looking around his class and seeing the interested looks, he scoffed and took his seat. Then let them, it's not like I'm interested anyway, he mumbled, flipping through a manga he had brought with him. Morning Kurosaki-kun, Orihime said, drawing his attention to the ditzy healer. Seeing her standing with a nervous look on her face, he could only guess that it was because of his increasing fan base. Hey Inoue, he greeted her casually, while she continued to fidget around him. Is there something you wanted? Oh no, I was just wondering how you're doing today, she squeaked out. Just fine thanks. Have you spoken to Machiru today? He asked, noticing her breath hitch at his question. Oh no, I completely forgot. She half shouted, grabbing her head in panic. Do you think she'll be mad that I didn't check on her after everything that happened yesterday? What if she doesn't want to be friends with me anymore? Or will she give me the silent treatment for the rest of my life? Unknown to her, said girl in question had just walked into class. Good morning Orihime, she greeted her in a friendly tone, causing Orihime to nearly jump out of her skin in surprise. Morning Ichigo, she said, turning her attention to him. Machiru, he replied, seeing that she was wearing a long-sleeved jersey to hide the bandages. How are you feeling today? I'm better, she replied with a smile. I wanted to give you this, she said, reaching into her bag and withdrawing a small box. Opening it, he saw a silver chain with a large obsidian gemstone attached to it. Looking carefully at it, he could see the kanji for protector carved into it. My aunt runs a crafts shop and she came by last night to help keep my mind of worrying about my mother. When she heard the story, she thought that it fit you, she explained, watching as he carefully lifted it from the box. It's great, but are you sure that you want me to have this? He asked as he held the silver chain between his fingers. It's just a small thank you for what you did yesterday, she said, rocking on the heels of her feet. Just accept it and be done with it, Kyoka called out to him. You're making her self-conscious about it, which isn't helping. Fine, he shot back, slipping the chain onto his wrist as Machiru watched. I just didn't want people to think this means something when she clearly doesn't mean anything by it. Bit late for that now, especially since you've slipped it on in front of everyone. God, how can you be so hopeless around girls at your age? She asked with a sigh, while he grumbled at her. Hey, I didn't ask for this, remember? He replied, hearing the whispering die down as Ms. Ochi walked into the class. You didn't ask for it, but it will happen to you nonetheless, she said with a tired yawn. Anyway, here's some good news for you. I should be done helping your soul refine your powers by tomorrow. Meaning that it will soon replenish your reserves just as fast, if not more so than when you wielded Zangetsu. Why do I get the feeling that also spells bad news for me? He asked, hearing her chuckle from within his inner world. Because after it's done, I'm going to focus my complete attention on you, she said in a sultry tone, making a shiver run down his spine. If you thought I was bad before, you haven't seen anything yet. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he grimaced in anticipation of the days to come, praying that it was nothing he couldn't handle. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.